My name is Sean, 27 years old, and I work as a software engineer in Seattle. 6 months ago, I suffered a traumatic brain injury that occasionally affects my memory. Last month, I sat at our family dinner table, excited about my sister Natalie's wedding. "Mom, I'm so excited for the wedding tomorrow," I said with a genuine smile. The room went silent. My mother Diane stared at me with cold eyes and said, "That happened last week, Sean." Natalie froze, avoiding my gaze. My world collapsed in that moment. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been blindsided by family betrayal. Before my accident, life was pretty good. I had a successful career at a tech company in downtown Seattle, creating software solutions for healthcare systems. My girlfriend Jessica and I had been together for 3 years, talking about moving in together. We had a small but nice apartment with a view of the city, and I was finally paying off my student loans. My relationship with my family was decent, not perfect, but we got along well enough. Natalie and I weren't extremely close, but we had the normal sibling relationship with occasional dinners and holiday gatherings. Everything changed 6 months ago on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was driving home from work, taking my usual route through downtown. The roads were slick from the downpour, and visibility was poor. I remember stopping at a red light just blocks from my apartment. When the light turned green, I proceeded through the intersection. That's when a delivery truck ran the red light from the cross street. I barely had time to register the headlights before impact. The truck slammed into the driver's side of my car, sending me spinning across the intersection. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors explained I had suffered a traumatic brain injury, along with a fractured collarbone and 3 broken ribs. The physical injuries would heal relatively quickly, but the TBI had more unpredictable consequences. I experienced issues with short-term memory, occasional disorientation, and difficulty concentrating for extended periods. During those first few weeks, my family seemed supportive. My mother visited the hospital daily, bringing homemade food that I could barely eat. Natalie came by every other day, usually just for short visits. My father Richard would sit quietly in the corner of the room, occasionally asking if I needed anything. Jessica was my rock, taking time off work to help with my recovery, attending doctor appointments, and making sure I followed all medical instructions. As the weeks passed and I returned home, my memory issues became more apparent. I would forget conversations we had just hours before. Important dates would slip from my mind, despite writing them down. I developed systems to help me cope, setting multiple reminders on my phone, keeping a detailed journal, and using color-coded calendars for different types of events. My family's patience began wearing thin around the 3-month mark. What started as gentle reminders turned into exasperated sighs and eye-rolling. My mother would snap, "I already told you that yesterday, Sean," when I asked the same question twice. My father would exchange knowing glances with her, as if my condition was somehow a choice I was making. Natalie began calling less frequently, claiming she was busy with work. It was during this period that Natalie announced her engagement to Travis, her boyfriend of 2 years. Travis came from a wealthy family with connections throughout the Pacific Northwest. His parents owned several successful car dealerships, and he worked in their corporate office. Natalie had always been impressed by status and money, so Travis was her perfect match. The engagement party was held at his parents' lakeside mansion, an elaborate affair with catering and live music. I remembered feeling anxious about attending the engagement party, worried I might forget someone's name or some important detail. I prepared extensively, reviewing photos of Travis's family members and rehearsing conversation topics. The evening went relatively well, though I noticed my mother steering certain guests away from extended conversations with me. At the time, I attributed it to coincidence rather than deliberate action. Over the following months, wedding planning consumed the family's attention. Natalie transformed into the stereotypical bridezilla, obsessing over every detail from the exact shade of her bridesmaids' dresses to the specific varieties of flowers in the centerpieces. I tried to stay involved, asking questions about the plans and offering to help where I could. My offers were usually politely declined, with Natalie saying, "It's fine, we've got it handled." I received the wedding invitation in the mail 3 months before the date. I immediately marked it on all my calendars and set multiple reminders. The invitation was beautiful, cream-colored cardstock with gold foil lettering. I remember placing it on my refrigerator with a special magnet, so I would see it every day. The date was Saturday, June 12th. At least, that's what I thought it said. As the wedding approached, family gatherings became more frequent for planning purposes. I attended when invited, though those invitations became increasingly rare. When I did attend, conversations would often stop when I entered the room, resuming with obviously changed topics. Again, I dismissed the behavior, assuming they were discussing wedding surprises. The night of the dinner, what I believed was the night before the wedding, I arrived at my parents' house feeling proud of myself. Despite my condition, I had remembered this important family event. I had even bought a new suit for the wedding, which was hanging in my car ready for the next day. I brought a small gift for Natalie, a framed photo of us as children that I thought would make her smile before her big day. My parents' house looked the same as always. The colonial-style home in the suburbs had been our family home for 20 years. The dining room was set with the good china, which confirmed my belief that this was a special pre-wedding dinner. My mother had prepared her signature roast beef with garlic mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. The familiar smell filled the house, momentarily comforting me before everything fell apart. When I arrived, everyone was already seated at the table. My mother Diane sat at one end, my father Richard at the other. Natalie and Travis sat together on one side. The atmosphere seemed strangely subdued for what I thought was a pre-wedding celebration, but I attributed that to pre-wedding nerves. I took my seat, smiling at everyone, completely unaware of the bomb that was about to drop. The dinner started normally enough. We passed dishes around the table, served wine, and engaged in what seemed like casual conversation. My father asked Travis about work, and they discussed the car business for a while. My mother mentioned something about her garden club meeting. Natalie was quieter than usual, picking at her food more than eating it. Looking back, the signs were there. The slightly tense atmosphere, the careful way everyone spoke, the topics that seemed deliberately benign. I remember feeling good that evening, clear-headed and present. My memory had been better over the previous few days, and I felt confident in my grasp of what was happening. I had checked my calendar multiple times that morning, confirming that the wedding was indeed the next day. The invitation on my refrigerator, or what I thought it said, had reinforced this belief. As we finished the main course, I decided to express my excitement for the upcoming event. I raised my glass of water, I avoided alcohol since the accident, and looked at my sister with genuine affection. "Mom, Dad, everyone, I just want to say how excited I am for the wedding tomorrow," I said, smiling broadly. "Natalie, I'm so happy for you and Travis, and I can't wait to celebrate with everyone." The silence that followed was immediate and deafening. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My father stared down at his plate. Travis looked uncomfortable, glancing at Natalie, who had gone completely still. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. Finally, my mother put her fork down with deliberate slowness. Her expression was a mixture of irritation and what I now recognize as poorly concealed guilt. "Sean," she said in that controlled tone she uses when she's trying not to sound angry. "The wedding was last week. Saturday, June 5th. I laughed, thinking she was joking. "No, it's tomorrow, June 12th. I've had it marked on all my calendars. I've been preparing for weeks." That's when I noticed Natalie's expression. She wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at her half-eaten dinner. Travis awkwardly placed his hand over hers on the table. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. "You're confused again," my mother continued. "The wedding was last week. It was beautiful. Everyone had a wonderful time." My heart began racing. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and checked the calendar. There it was, Natalie's wedding marked on June 5th, with a line through it indicating it was a past event. But that couldn't be right. I distinctly remembered marking it for the 12th. I scrolled through my photos, looking for pictures from the event, but found none. "That's not possible," I insisted, my voice rising slightly. "I have the invitation right at home. It says June 12th. I've been counting down the days." Natalie finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was last week, Sean. Saturday." The room began to spin slightly as panic set in. Had I really missed my own sister's wedding? How could I have gotten the date so wrong when I was so careful with my calendar system? "Why didn't anyone call me?" I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. "If I missed it, why didn't someone reach out?" "I didn't get any calls, any texts." My mother sighed dramatically. "We tried, Sean. You must have forgotten. This is exactly why we were concerned about you attending. Your condition makes things complicated." Something about her tone struck me as wrong. In my confusion and embarrassment, I nearly missed it, but there was a note of satisfaction in her voice that didn't fit someone who was supposedly disappointed that their son missed an important family event. "Show me pictures," I demanded suddenly. "If the wedding was last week, show me photos." There was another uncomfortable silence. Travis pulled out his phone and reluctantly opened his photo gallery. He turned the screen toward me, showing images of him and Natalie at what was clearly their wedding. Natalie in a white dress, Travis in a tuxedo. My parents smiling beside them. Extended family I recognized, everyone looking happy. Everyone, except me, because I wasn't there. In any of the photos. "I don't understand," I said, my voice now barely audible. "I don't remember getting any calls, any texts, any reminders." I scrolled through my own phone's call history and message logs. Nothing from my family in the days leading up to June 5th. Nothing on the day itself. No missed calls. No voicemails asking where I was. Nothing. That's when I noticed another detail that sent chills down my spine. Looking more closely at Travis's photos, I could see the date stamp in the corner of some images. June 5th. But the decorations, the flowers, the setting, they matched exactly what Natalie had described to me when discussing her plans. Plans I clearly remembered. How could I remember details of an event I supposedly wasn't told about? "Let me see the invitation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The one you sent me." My mother and Natalie exchanged a quick glance that set off alarm bells in my head. "We sent it months ago," my mother replied dismissively. "You probably misplaced it with your condition." "I have it on my refrigerator," I insisted. "It says June 12th. I know it does." "You must have read it wrong." My father finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "It was always scheduled for the 5th. Everyone knew that." A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. I pulled out my phone again and opened my email. I searched for any wedding-related messages from my family. There were a few from months ago, in the early planning stages, but nothing recent. Nothing with date confirmations or reminders. "Did you all discuss the wedding in the family group chat?" I asked, referring to the text message group that included my parents, Natalie, and me. Another telling pause. "We created a separate chat for wedding details," Natalie admitted, "to not overwhelm you." "A separate chat? That I wasn't in?" My voice cracked slightly. So how exactly was I supposed to know about any changes or details? The uncomfortable silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a case of me forgetting or misremembering. This was deliberate exclusion disguised as concern. "I need some air," I said, pushing back from the table. I walked out to the front porch, my mind racing with confusion and hurt. I heard the door open behind me, and Natalie stepped out. For a moment, I thought she might offer some explanation that would make sense of everything. Instead, she just looked uncomfortable. "Sean, I'm sorry if you feel left out," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But you have to understand, this was the most important day of my life. We just wanted everything to go perfectly, and I would have ruined it." I asked, the painful realization washing over me. "Is that what you're saying?" She didn't answer directly, which was an answer in itself. Travis's family. They're very particular, traditional. We were worried that if you had one of your episodes, I felt like I'd been slapped. Episodes? I have memory issues, Natalie. I'm not having episodes. And I would never have done anything to ruin your wedding. We couldn't take that chance, she said quietly. I'm sorry. In that moment, I understood with complete clarity. My family had deliberately excluded me from my sister's wedding. And now they were trying to gaslight me into believing it was my fault for forgetting. I stormed back into the dining room, a strange calm settling over me despite the storm raging inside. Everyone looked up with expressions ranging from annoyed to guilty. You deliberately excluded me from the wedding, I stated flatly. It wasn't a question. My mother immediately shifted into defensive mode. That's ridiculous, Sean. Why would we do that? I don't know, Mom. Why don't you tell me? Because the evidence is pretty clear. No calls or texts about the wedding date. A separate group chat I wasn't part of. And somehow my invitation had a different date than everyone else's. You're overreacting, my father said, though he still couldn't quite meet my eyes. This is just confusion from your condition. That word again. Condition. Spoken like a disease. Something shameful that needed to be hidden away. If I was just confused, I pressed on. Then show me the texts where you reminded me about the wedding. Show me the calls where you checked if I was coming. Show me anything that indicates you actually wanted me there. The silence was damning. You can't, I continued, because they don't exist. You never intended for me to be at that wedding. My mother's facade finally cracked. Fine. Yes. We decided it would be better if you weren't there. Can you blame us? Every family gathering turns into the Sean show because of your issues. We just wanted one day, one important day, where we didn't have to worry about you forgetting names or getting confused or needing special treatment. Her words hit like physical blows, but I refused to show how much they hurt. And the invitation with the wrong date? Was that your idea too? Natalie at least had the decency to look ashamed. It was Mom's suggestion. We thought you might not notice. And if you did show up on the 12th, we could just say you got confused again. I turned to Travis, who had been silent throughout this exchange. Did you know about this? He shifted uncomfortably. I was told it was for your own good. That you'd be embarrassed if you came and couldn't remember people. For my own good, I repeated bitterly. How convenient. I looked around the table at my family. These people who were supposed to love and support me, unconditionally. Instead, they had conspired to exclude me from one of the most significant family events, then tried to make me believe it was my fault. What kind of family does this? I asked quietly. What kind of mother deliberately sets her son up to fail? What kind of sister excludes her brother from her wedding? You don't understand the pressure we were under, my mother snapped. Travis's family has expectations. They're not used to dealing with people like you. People like me? You mean people recovering from traumatic brain injuries? People who are still your family despite having some memory issues? This is exactly why we didn't want you there, my mother said coldly. This victim mentality. This drama. You would have ruined everything with your neediness. Something broke inside me at those words. Not in a way that hurt, but in a way that freed me. Like a chain I hadn't realized I was carrying had suddenly fallen away. I'm leaving, I said, standing up. I don't deserve this. No one does. Sean, don't be so sensitive. My father finally spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction. Your mother didn't mean it like that. Yes, she did, I replied calmly. She meant exactly that. And you let it happen. You've always let it happen. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. The worst part isn't that you excluded me. It's that you tried to make me think I was crazy for feeling excluded. That's not love. That's abuse. My mother scoffed. Always so dramatic. This is why we needed one normal day without you. Those words confirmed everything. I didn't respond, just walked out the door to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away from the house, I saw them watching from the window, not coming after me, just watching me leave. The drive home was a blur. Traffic lights and street signs melted together as tears blurred my vision. I had to pull over twice to collect myself before continuing. Questions tumbled through my mind. How long had they been treating me this way? Had they always seen me as a burden, even before my accident? Was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that made my own family discard me so easily? When I finally reached my apartment, I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour, unable to summon the energy to go inside. The suit I'd bought for the wedding hung in the back seat, a painful reminder of my misplaced hope and trust. Eventually, I dragged myself upstairs, ignoring neighbors' greetings, and locked the door behind me. There on my refrigerator was the invitation, exactly where I'd left it. With shaking hands, I took it down and examined it closely. The date clearly read, Saturday, June 12th. I hadn't been confused. I hadn't misremembered. They had sent me a different invitation than everyone else. That realization broke the dam. I sank to my kitchen floor and sobbed, deep, wrenching cries that came from a place of profound betrayal. Not just the wedding, but the deliberate cruelty of making me believe I was at fault, using my injury against me in the most manipulative way possible. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually the tears stopped, replaced by a hollow emptiness that somehow hurt even more. The next morning, Jessica came over after I texted her what happened. She found me still in yesterday's clothes, eyes swollen from crying, surrounded by photo albums and old family cards I'd pulled out during the night. Searching for clues, I suppose, of when my family had started seeing me as disposable. "Oh, Sean," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. She didn't offer empty platitudes or try to minimize what had happened. She just held me and let me talk through the painful revelations of the previous night. "Am I crazy for feeling this hurt?" I asked her. "Am I overreacting?" "Absolutely not," Jessica said firmly. "What they did was cruel and deliberate. They used your injury against you in the worst possible way." Her validation helped anchor me when I felt like I was drifting in a sea of self-doubt. Later that day, my best friend Marcus came by after work. Unlike Jessica's gentle approach, Marcus was furious on my behalf. "This is straight-up gaslighting, man," he said after I showed him the invitation with the incorrect date. "They're trying to make you question your own reality. That's abuse, no matter how you slice it." I hadn't thought of it in those terms before, but he was right. My family had taken my vulnerability, my occasional memory issues, and weaponized it against me, making me doubt my own perceptions and experiences. Over the next few days, I began investigating further, needing to understand the full extent of their deception. I logged into Facebook, which I rarely used anymore, and found Natalie's wedding album. There were dozens of photos, family, friends, Travis's relatives, all smiling and celebrating. The absence of any photos with me was glaring, but even more telling were the comments. "Beautiful wedding. So glad everyone could make it. Perfect day. For the perfect couple." The whole family looked so happy together. The whole family. Except me. I dug deeper, messaging a cousin I'd always been close with. "Hey, Ryan. Just wondering. Did anyone ask about me at Natalie's wedding? Did they explain why I wasn't there?" His response came hours later. "They told everyone you weren't feeling well and couldn't make it. Some people mentioned it was probably because of your accident. Is everything okay? So they had crafted a cover story. I wasn't feeling well. Not. We deliberately gave him the wrong date so he wouldn't show up. The final piece fell into place when an old family friend, Mrs. Jenkins, called me the following day. She'd been like a second mother to me growing up, always bringing cookies when she visited and sending birthday cards, even after I moved away for college. "Sean, dear," she said when I answered, "I missed you at the wedding. Your mother said you were having a bad day with your memory issues and thought it best not to come. I wanted to check how you're doing now." I nearly dropped the phone. "Mrs. Jenkins, I wasn't having a bad day. I was given the wrong date. I thought the wedding was on the 12th, not the 5th. A long pause followed. "That's strange. Because I distinctly remember your mother talking about this at the bridal shower last month. She mentioned to several of us that they were worried about your condition causing disruptions, especially with Travis's family being so prominent. I didn't think much of it at the time, but..." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the implication of what she was saying. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "It helps me understand what really happened." After that call, I felt a strange mix of vindication and devastation. The evidence was overwhelming. My exclusion had been planned well in advance, discussed openly with others, and executed with calculated precision, all while I believed my family was supporting my recovery. I decided to speak with Dr. Wilson, my therapist, who had been helping me navigate life post-injury. I made an emergency appointment and brought the invitation, along with screenshots of messages and photos that corroborated my story. Dr. Wilson listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled as I laid out the evidence. "Sean, what you're describing goes beyond thoughtlessness or poor judgment," he said after I finished. "This is a pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation. Using your TBI as justification makes it particularly egregious." "But why?" I asked. The question that had been haunting me. Why would they do this? I'm still their son, their brother. "Family dynamics are complex," he replied carefully. "Sometimes when a family member becomes vulnerable, through injury, illness, or other circumstances, it can trigger unhealthy responses, especially in families that already had underlying issues. Your injury may have simply exposed problems that were already there." We spent the session exploring past incidents that, in retrospect, showed similar patterns of manipulation. Times when my mother had pitted me and Natalie against each other. Occasions when my father had enabled toxic behavior by remaining silent. The family's collective tendency to value appearances over authenticity. The hardest part, I admitted, is that I've been gaslit to the point where I don't trust my own memories anymore. Even with evidence right in front of me, there's still this voice saying, "Maybe I did forget. Maybe I did misunderstand." That's exactly what gaslighting does, Dr. Wilson explained. It makes you doubt your own reality, but your brain injury doesn't make you incapable of knowing when you're being mistreated. Trust those feelings. Over the next few days, I began the painful process of examining my family relationships with new clarity. I created a document detailing incidents of manipulation I could remember, both before and after my accident. The pattern was clear and disturbing. My mother had always been controlling, using guilt and shame to maintain power. My father had always been passive, choosing peace over justice. Natalie had always been willing to throw others under the bus to maintain her social standing. My injury hadn't created these dynamics. It had just made them more obvious and given them a convenient excuse. Around this time, I also connected with Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who had distanced herself from the family years ago. I'd always been told she was difficult and unstable, but decided to reach out anyway. Our phone conversation was illuminating. "I'm not surprised," she said after I explained what had happened. "Your mother did similar things to me for years. When I finally stood up to her, the whole family turned against me. It's her playbook. Isolate and discredit anyone who challenges her control." Patricia shared stories from their childhood that helped explain, though not excuse, my mother's behavior. Growing up with an alcoholic father who was charming in public but abusive at home, learning to control her environment as a survival mechanism, developing a fixation on appearances to mask family dysfunction. The problem is, Patricia explained, she never unlearned those patterns, even when they weren't needed anymore. And she taught them to your sister. Your father was just weak enough to go along with it all. That conversation was both painful and freeing. Understanding the generational patterns didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me see that their behavior wasn't about me at all. It was about their own unresolved issues and dysfunction. With the support of Jessica, Marcus, Dr. Wilson, and my newfound connection with Aunt Patricia, I made the difficult decision to distance myself from my toxic family environment. I blocked their numbers temporarily, needing space to process and heal without their continued manipulation. I focused on rebuilding my self-trust, working with Dr. Wilson on techniques to distinguish between actual memory issues and the self-doubt instilled by gaslighting. I created stronger systems for managing my TBI symptoms, with Jessica and Marcus providing backup verification when needed. Most importantly, I began to rediscover my worth outside of my family's distorted mirror. My colleagues at work valued my contributions, despite knowing about my injury. My friends stood by me without condition. Jessica loved me not in spite of my challenges, but as a whole person. For the first time, I could see clearly that the problem had never been my injury. The problem was a family system that couldn't accommodate any weakness, any deviation from their carefully constructed image of perfection. A week passed with no contact from my family. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was both painful and peaceful, like a wound that finally had space to begin healing without being constantly reopened. Then, on the 8th day, after our confrontation, the first message came through. A text from Natalie. "Sean, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the wedding. Can we talk? I feel terrible about how things have been left between us." A misunderstanding. As if accidentally giving someone the wrong time for a casual dinner and deliberately excluding them from a wedding were comparable. I didn't respond. The next day, a voicemail from my mother. "Sean, you're overreacting to this whole wedding situation. Everyone makes mistakes. You need to stop being so sensitive and call me back so we can move past this childishness." No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. No actual apology. Just more blame and invalidation. I didn't respond to that either. 2 days later, my father called. His message was awkward, halting. "Son, your mother and sister are upset about this situation. I know feelings were hurt, but family is family. Can't we just talk this out? Give me a call when you get a chance." Always the peacemaker, never addressing the actual problem. Always prioritizing harmony over honesty. I considered responding to my father, as he seemed the least directly involved in the deception. But his complicity, his willingness to stand by while they manipulated me, made him just as responsible in his own way. So I maintained my silence. And I focused on healing. Jessica and I spent more time together, doing things I enjoyed but had neglected. Hiking at Discovery Park, trying new restaurants, attending small concerts of local bands. Marcus and I resumed our weekly basketball games at the community center, modified to accommodate my physical limitations but still competitive and fun. I reconnected with colleagues outside of work, people who knew me before the accident and treated me the same after. Then, 11 days after the confrontation, they showed up at my door unannounced. All 3 of them, mother, father, sister, standing in the hallway of my apartment building when I returned from grocery shopping. "We need to talk," my mother announced, as if her presence on my doorstep was both expected and welcome. "This has gone on long enough." I stood there, paper grocery bags in my arms, momentarily frozen by their audacity. Part of me wanted to brush past them and lock the door. Another part recognized this as an opportunity for the closure I needed. You have 15 minutes, I said finally, unlocking my door. I need to put these groceries away. They filed into my apartment, looking around with barely disguised judgment at my modest living space. I deliberately took my time storing the groceries, using the mundane task to center myself and maintain control of the situation. When I finally turned to face them, they had arranged themselves on my sofa and armchair, my mother in the center of the sofa, my father beside her, Natalie perched on the arm of the chair. "Sean," my mother began in what I recognized as her carefully rehearsed voice, "we're here because we're concerned about you. This silent treatment is childish and hurtful to the entire family." Already starting with blame. I remained standing, arms crossed, saying nothing. "What happened with the wedding was unfortunate," she continued when I didn't respond. "There was confusion with the dates, and in the chaos of wedding planning, wires got crossed. We never meant to hurt you." "Confusion with the dates," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling a deliberate deception now?" My mother's expression hardened slightly before she forced it back into a mask of concern. "See, this is exactly the problem. You're so determined to believe we had malicious intent. We made a mistake, Sean. People make mistakes. A mistake is writing down the wrong number," I replied evenly. "A mistake is forgetting to make a phone call. What you did took planning and coordination. You created a separate group chat to discuss wedding details without me. You printed a different invitation for me. You created a cover story about why I wasn't at the wedding. Those aren't mistakes. Those are choices." My father shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Natalie examined her manicure with sudden interest. "We were trying to protect you," my mother insisted, changing tactics. "We were worried you'd be uncomfortable with all those people, that you might get confused or overwhelmed. We thought we were doing what was best for you." "No," I said firmly. "You were doing what was best for yourselves. If you were concerned about me, you would have talked to me, asked what accommodations I might need, worked with me to make sure I could participate in a way that worked for everyone. You didn't protect me. You erased me." Natalie finally spoke up. "It wasn't just about you, Sean. It was my wedding. The most important day of my life. Travis's family is very traditional, very proper. They have expectations. We were worried that if you had one of your memory episodes, it would create an uncomfortable situation for everyone. So my presence as your brother was less important than impressing your in-laws," I stated flatly. "Good to know where I stand." "That's not fair," Natalie protested, though her eyes betrayed her. "You're twisting my words." "Am I? Because it sounds like you just admitted that appearances were more important than including your brother in your wedding." My father finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who knew he had failed but couldn't quite admit it. "Son, we understand you're hurt, and maybe we didn't handle things the best way. But at the end of the day, we're family. We need to move past this, for the family's sake. For the family's sake. Not for my sake. Not because what they did was wrong, but to preserve the illusion of family harmony that was apparently more important than actual respect or love. I'm not interested in sweeping this under the rug," I told him. "I'm not interested in pretending everything is fine when it's not. What you all did was cruel and manipulative, and none of you has actually apologized for it." "We're here, aren't we?" my mother said with exasperation. "Isn't that enough? Do we need to grovel? Would that make you happy?" Her words revealed everything. The belief that showing up entitled them to forgiveness, that acknowledging harm was somehow beneath them, that my hurt feelings were just another inconvenience to be managed, rather than genuine pain to be addressed. "I don't want groveling," I said quietly. "I want honesty. I want accountability. I want acknowledgement that what you did wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding, but a deliberate choice to exclude me and then make me think it was my fault." My mother's facade cracked, revealing the anger beneath. "Fine. Yes, we gave you the wrong date on purpose. Yes, we didn't want you at the wedding. Can you blame us? Every family gathering for the past 6 months has revolved around your condition. We're always walking on eggshells, worrying about what you'll forget next, having to explain your situation to others. We just wanted one normal day. One day that wasn't about Sean and his problems. The room fell silent after her outburst. My father looked down at his hands. Natalie had the decency to appear slightly ashamed, though not enough to contradict our mother. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm in the face of such naked hostility. Thank you for finally being honest. That's all I needed to hear. I walked to my front door and opened it wide. Now, get out of my apartment. Sean, my father began, rising from the sofa. Let's not be hasty. Get out, I repeated, my voice steady. All of you. Now. My mother stood, straightening her jacket with dignified indignation. If that's how you want to be, fine. But don't come crawling back when you realize how childish you're being. I won't, I assured her. They filed past me, my mother with her head held high, my father with slumped shoulders, Natalie somewhere in between. None of them looked me in the eye as they passed. As my mother reached the threshold, she turned back. This isn't how family treats each other, Sean. The irony of her statement was so profound it almost made me laugh. You're right, Mom. It isn't. Remember that. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, listening to their footsteps retreat down the hallway. Instead of the breakdown I had half expected, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground with my family. I had named their behavior for what it was and refused to accept it. The apartment felt different somehow, cleaner, lighter, as if a long-standing source of toxicity had been removed. I walked to the window and watched them get into my father's car in the parking lot below. They were talking animatedly, probably already rewriting the narrative of what had just happened to cast themselves as victims of my unreasonable demands. But that was no longer my problem. Their stories about me no longer defined my reality. In the days and weeks that followed, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions. Sometimes I felt empowered and liberated by my decision to set boundaries with my family. Other times, doubt and guilt would creep in, the residual effects of years of conditioning to prioritize family harmony above personal well-being. During those difficult moments, I leaned heavily on my support system. Jessica was unfailingly patient, listening when I needed to process my feelings, and distracting me when I needed a break from the emotional weight. Marcus provided practical perspective, reminding me of specific instances of manipulation when I started to question whether I'd overreacted. My sessions with Dr. Wilson became crucial to my healing process. He helped me understand that the grief I was feeling was normal. I was mourning not just the loss of my current family relationships, but also the ideal family I had always wished for, but never truly had. What you're experiencing is called ambiguous loss, he explained during one particularly difficult session. You're grieving people who are still physically present in the world, but emotionally absent from your life. It's one of the most challenging forms of grief, because there's no closure, no finality. We work through exercises designed to help me process these complex emotions without judgment. I learned to recognize the difference between genuine remorse for necessary boundaries and the false guilt instilled by years of manipulation. Dr. Wilson also helped me identify and begin dismantling unhealthy coping mechanisms I had developed in response to my family dynamics. People-pleasing, conflict avoidance, seeking validation from others when I should have been trusting my own perceptions. About a month after the confrontation, Aunt Patricia invited me to visit her in Portland. The weekend I spent with her was transformative. Unlike the rest of my family, she spoke openly about the dysfunction in our shared history, validating my experiences without dramatizing them. Your mother and I grew up in a household where love was conditional, she told me over coffee on her back porch. Our father could be charming and generous one day, cold and critical the next. We never knew which version we'd get, so we both developed different survival strategies. I rebelled and eventually left. Your mother conformed and learned to control her environment, to minimize unpredictability. She showed me old family photos I'd never seen before, filling in gaps in my understanding of our family history. Your mother isn't a villain, Sean. She's someone who never learned healthier ways to feel safe in the world. But understanding that doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment. Patricia also shared her own journey of setting boundaries with the family, the backlash she experienced, and the peace she eventually found. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but also the most necessary. Sometimes the family you choose is healthier than the family you're born into. Back in Seattle, I continued rebuilding my life with intentionality. I created structures that supported my brain injury recovery while also nurturing my independence. I set up a detailed digital calendar that Jessica had access to, providing a backup system without fostering dependency. Marcus and I established a weekly check-in where we would review any important upcoming events, giving me confidence in my planning. At work, I had a candid conversation with my supervisor about my condition and the family situation that had compounded it. To my surprise, she was extraordinarily supportive, sharing that her own brother had experienced a TBI from military service. The brain can heal in remarkable ways when given the right environment, she told me. And it sounds like removing that stress might be the best thing you could do for your recovery. She was right. As the weeks passed, I noticed improvements in my memory and cognitive function. The constant anxiety of trying to please my family, of walking on eggshells to avoid criticism, had been consuming mental resources I hadn't realized were being drained. Without that pressure, my mind seemed to function more clearly. I joined a support group for TBI survivors, finding community with others who understood the unique challenges of living with an invisible injury. Their stories of navigating relationships post-injury helped me recognize that my family's response had been particularly unhealthy, not the norm. My family educated themselves about TBI, one group member shared. They learned strategies to support me without babying me. They advocate for me when needed and step back when I can manage on my own. That's what love looks like. Hearing about healthy family responses to injury helped me recognize what I should have received and reinforced that my decision to distance myself was justified. 3 months after the wedding incident, I received an unexpected email from Natalie. Unlike our mother's demanding messages or our father's placating ones, hers seemed genuinely reflective. Sean, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened with the wedding. At first, I was angry that you wouldn't just let it go. But the more I've reflected, the more I've realized how wrong we were. Mom suggested the separate invitation, and I went along with it because it was easier than standing up to her. That's not an excuse. It's actually worse, because I knew it was wrong and did it anyway. I'm truly sorry for hurting you, and for not being the sister you deserved. I understand if you don't want to respond, but I wanted you to know that at least one of us recognizes the harm we caused. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process my feelings about her apology. It seemed sincere, acknowledging specific wrongdoing rather than offering vague regrets. Still, I wasn't ready to re-engage, not without seeing sustained change rather than momentary remorse. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jessica deepened as we navigated this challenging period together. Seeing her unwavering support during my lowest moments helped me recognize what healthy love looked like. Consistent, respectful, honest. I'm thinking about asking Jessica to move in with me, I told Marcus during one of our basketball games. About time, he replied, attempting a three-pointer that bounced off the rim. You two are good together. She sees you, the real you. That's it exactly, I agreed, catching the rebound. She doesn't need me to be perfect. She just needs me to be authentic. When I broached the subject with Jessica, her response was characteristically thoughtful. I'd love to live with you, Sean, but I want to make sure it's for the right reasons. Not because you need support with your TBI, but because we want to build a life together. Her concern made me love her even more. It's definitely the latter. Being with you makes me happy. The support is a bonus, not the foundation. 2 weeks later, she moved into my apartment, bringing warmth and laughter into spaces that had previously held only painful echoes of family confrontations. We discussed our future, the family we might create someday, the values we would prioritize, the patterns we would consciously break. If we ever have children, I told her one night as we unpacked her books onto my shelves, I want them to know unconditional love isn't just a concept. I want them to experience it every day, to never question their worth or belonging. We'll do better, she promised, squeezing my hand. We'll learn from what hurt us and build something different. The contrast between the family I was born into and the family I was choosing couldn't have been clearer. One was built on control, appearance, and conditional acceptance. The other was founded on respect, authenticity, and genuine care. 5 months after the wedding incident, I received another email from Natalie, informing me that our father had experienced a minor heart attack. He was stable and recovering, but the event had apparently triggered some reflection. He's been asking for you, she wrote. I'm not trying to guilt you into visiting, just letting you know. Whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice. After discussing it with Dr. Wilson, Jessica, and Marcus, I decided to visit my father in the hospital with clear boundaries and Jessica accompanying me for support. The visit was brief and somewhat awkward, but not hostile. My father seemed genuinely changed by his brush with mortality, apologizing without excuses for his role in enabling the family dysfunction. I should have protected you, he said, his voice weak but determined. I failed you as a father, Sean, and I'm sorry. It wasn't a magical reconciliation, but it was something authentic, perhaps the first truly honest exchange we'd had in years. My mother, predictably, remained entrenched in her perspective. When I encountered her in the hospital corridor, her greeting was stiff but superficially polite. She made no reference to our estrangement, acting as if it were a temporary disagreement rather than a fundamental breach of trust. But her opinion no longer defined my reality. The healing I had done, the support system I had built, the self-trust I had reclaimed, these gave me the strength to interact with her without being diminished by her inability to acknowledge the harm she had caused. 6 months after the wedding incident, I felt like a different person, stronger, clearer, more authentic. My memory issues still existed, but had improved significantly in the healthier emotional environment. More importantly, I had learned to trust myself again, to distinguish between actual memory lapses and the self-doubt instilled by years of gaslighting. The journey wasn't over, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. Family dynamics don't change overnight, and setting boundaries is an ongoing process, not a one-time event. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt equipped to navigate those challenges from a place of strength rather than vulnerability. As Jessica and I walked along Alki Beach one evening, watching the sunset paint the Seattle skyline in gold and crimson, she asked, "Do you ever regret standing up to your family, drawing that line in the sand?" I considered her question carefully before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they couldn't be what I needed them to be. But I don't regret valuing myself enough to say no more. That was the most important step in healing, recognizing that I deserved better. She squeezed my hand as we continued walking, our future stretching before us like the open water. Vast, sometimes challenging, but full of possibility. 6 months turned into a year. Spring bloomed into summer, summer faded into fall, and before I knew it, I was marking the anniversary of that fateful family dinner where everything had changed. But unlike the raw pain of that night, I now felt a sense of peace and perspective that had seemed impossible then. My life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. Jessica and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm in our shared apartment, our relationship deepening with each passing month. My career had advanced, with a promotion to lead developer on a healthcare project that felt meaningful and aligned with my values. My friendship with Marcus remained a cornerstone of my support system, while new friendships had blossomed through my TBI support group and other communities. My relationship with my family remained complex, but had evolved in different ways with each member. Natalie and I had cautiously rebuilt a limited connection, beginning with occasional emails and progressing to monthly coffee meetings. Her initial apology had proven genuine, backed by consistent respect for my boundaries and a willingness to acknowledge the family patterns that had led to my exclusion. "Travis and I are thinking about starting a family," she confided during one of our meetings. "It's made me think a lot about what kind of parent I want to be. What kind of aunt I want to be to your kids someday, if you have them. I don't want to repeat Mom's patterns." Her self-awareness was encouraging, though I remained cautious. "Awareness is the first step," I told her, "but breaking generational patterns takes constant vigilance." "I know," she nodded. "That's why I started therapy last month. I don't want to bring a child into the world until I've done some serious work on myself." That revelation surprised and heartened me. Perhaps real change was possible, at least for some of us. My father had made his own attempts at reconciliation following his heart attack. Our relationship had thawed into something cordial, though not close. He occasionally invited me to lunch or to watch Seahawks games, careful not to pressure me when I declined. During one such lunch, he made an observation that stayed with me. "You seem happier now, Sean. More yourself." I realize that's a sad commentary on our family, that you needed to step away to find that. I'm sorry for my part in it. The apology was simple but profound, coming from a man who had spent decades avoiding difficult conversations. I nodded, acknowledging his words without rushing to absolve him. We both knew rebuilding trust would take time, if it happened at all. My mother remained the most resistant to change. Her attempts at contact followed a predictable pattern, beginning with casual overtures as if nothing had happened, escalating to guilt trips when those failed, then retreating into injured silence before starting the cycle again. I maintained firm boundaries, engaging only when she could interact without manipulation or denial. "Your mother is who she is," Aunt Patricia reminded me during one of our now regular phone calls. "She may never be capable of the self-reflection needed to truly repair your relationship. That's not your failure. It's just reality." That perspective helped me release the lingering hope that somehow, someday, my mother would transform into the nurturing parent I had always craved. Accepting her limitations freed me from the endless cycle of expectation and disappointment that had defined our relationship for so long. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jessica continued to flourish in ways that sometimes surprised me. One evening, as we prepared dinner together in our kitchen, she asked casually, "Have you thought about us getting married someday?" The question caught me off guard, not because I hadn't considered it, but because I had been thinking about it constantly. "Actually," I admitted, "I've been looking at rings for the past month." Her smile lit up the room. "Really?" "Really. I just wanted to find the perfect moment and make sure I wasn't rushing into something because of everything that happened with my family." She put down the knife she was using to chop vegetables and turned to face me. "And what did you decide?" "That what happened with my family actually made me more certain, not less. It showed me what real support looks like, what real love looks like." I took her hands in mine. "You never once made me feel broken or burdensome because of my TBI. You never used my vulnerability against me. You've been my rock through all of this, Jessica, and I want to spend my life with you." "Is this a proposal?" she asked, eyes shining with unshed tears. I laughed softly. "Not the one I planned. The ring is hidden in my sock drawer, and I was thinking somewhere more romantic than our kitchen." "This is perfect," she interrupted. "Just us, being real with each other. That's all I've ever wanted." 2 weeks later, we were engaged, celebrating with a small gathering of friends who had supported us through the challenging year. Marcus gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes, acknowledging the journey I'd undertaken and the strength I'd found along the way. Even Natalie attended, keeping a respectful distance from the center of festivities but offering sincere congratulations. "Jessica is exactly what you deserve," she told me quietly. "Someone who sees your worth without conditions." As our wedding planning began, ironically echoing the event that had catalyzed so much change, I found myself reflecting on all I had learned through the painful experience with my family. I had learned that sometimes the healthiest families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. That blood connections are not automatic entitlements to our time, energy, or presence. That love without respect is not really love at all. I had learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. That forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. That healing isn't linear but happens in fits and starts, good days and bad, moments of clarity followed by periods of doubt. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was inherent, not dependent on others' recognition or validation. My traumatic brain injury had made me vulnerable, yes, but it had also revealed who truly valued me beyond what I could do or how I could perform. In that revelation was a painful but necessary truth. Some people love conditionally, and no amount of trying to meet those conditions will ever be enough. Dr. Wilson described it as the gift of disillusionment, the freedom that comes from seeing reality clearly, without the distorting lens of wishful thinking or denial. That gift had allowed me to build a life based on truth rather than comforting fictions, authentic connection rather than superficial harmony. 1 year and 3 months after that fateful dinner, Jessica and I were married in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. My father attended alone. My mother had refused to come when I declined to give her a role in the planning. Natalie was there with Travis, respectful of the boundaries I had established. Aunt Patricia stood in the place traditionally reserved for the mother of the groom. Marcus was my best man, of course. In his speech, he said something that resonated deeply. Sometimes life's greatest wounds become our greatest teachers. Sean has taken an experience that could have broken him and used it instead to build something beautiful, a life of integrity, authenticity, and real love. As Jessica and I spoke our vows, I felt a profound sense of completion, not because all wounds were healed or all conflicts resolved. They weren't, and some might never be. But because I had found my way back to myself through the darkness of betrayal and manipulation, I had reclaimed my narrative from those who sought to control it. The path forward wouldn't always be smooth. There would be more difficult conversations with my family, more boundaries to maintain, more complex emotions to navigate. My TBI would continue to present challenges, requiring ongoing adaptations and occasional setbacks. But I faced these realities from a place of strength now, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not who they needed me to be. People who saw my injury as a circumstance to be accommodated, not a flaw to be hidden away. People who valued truth over comfort, authenticity over appearances. In that knowledge was a peace I had never known before. The peace that comes from living in alignment with your values, from choosing health over habit, growth over familiarity, truth over illusion. As Jessica and I danced at our reception, surrounded by the family we had chosen, I whispered in her ear, "Thank you for helping me find my way through the darkest time." She smiled, that radiant smile that had been my beacon throughout the journey. "You found your own way, Sean." I just held the flashlight, and she was right. The strength had been within me all along, waiting for the moment when I would finally claim it. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it mattered most? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step in healing, both for ourselves and for others walking similar paths. Thank you for being part of this community that values authenticity and growth. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and love, no matter what challenges you face.